The village of Ndlovu rested between rolling hills and red soil paths carved by years of footsteps, memories, and fading stories. At the far end of this quiet place stood a small wooden house with peeling paint and a crooked front porch. It belonged to Mama Ruth, an elderly woman known to every child for her sweet-smelling ginger biscuits and to every adult for her warm smile that carried both kindness and something unspoken. Every morning before the sun stretched itself across the fields, Mama Ruth would sit on her old cane chair beside the window. She would watch the world wake up, goats wandering lazily, distant laughter of schoolchildren, and the soft rustle of wind brushing against the mango tree outside her home. She always seemed calm, but behind her gentle eyes, something lived. A heaviness that only surfaces in the quiet hours, when the world cannot distract her anymore. Her home was small, yet it carried the weight of decades. The walls were decorated with faded cloths she embroidered in her youth, back when her fingers were faster and her heart a little lighter. A chipped clay teapot always sat on the table, waiting for visitors she rarely received. Mama Ruth's life was simple, almost too simple for someone who had experienced storms deeper than the village had ever known. Inside her bedroom, tucked beneath layers of blankets and memories, was an old wooden box. No one knew about it. No one ever asked. And she never volunteered information. The village believed she had no children, no husband, no family left. And Mama Ruth never corrected them. She simply smiled, nodded, and redirected the conversation. To her, silence was safer than truth, because truth had claws, and she had learned long ago how deeply it could cut. Though her back was bent and her steps slow, Mama Ruth carried herself with a dignity that made even the younger women admire her. They often wondered how she survived so many years alone. At night, when lamps glowed behind windows, they would see her silhouette through the curtains, quietly mending clothes or stirring soup. There was something almost sacred about her presence, like a fading storybook page that still held powerful meaning. But most didn't know that for Mama Ruth, loneliness wasn't the hardest part. It was the memories. Memories of a past so heavy, she sometimes felt her chest tighten just thinking about it. There were nights she would wake up suddenly, heart pounding, hearing echoes of a baby's cry she hadn't heard in years. Nights when she would sit at the edge of her bed and whisper prayers for a child she once held, and lost in a way the world never understood. Still, every morning she rose with quiet strength. She swept her front yard, fed the birds, brewed her tea, and greeted the day with a soft determination. To the villagers, she was wise, peaceful, and strong. But deep inside, Mama Ruth knew her peace was only borrowed. Because hidden in that wooden box was the secret that shaped her whole life. And the moment to reveal it was closer than she wanted to admit.
The evening sun dipped low behind the hills, painting Mama Ruth's small house in a warm gold that made the wood glow like an old photograph. The wind was gentle that day, but it carried something different, an unsettling reminder that time was moving faster than she wished. Her hands, once steady and strong, now trembled slightly as she walked in her bedroom. She paused at the doorway, her breathing slow and heavy. She knew why she had come. She had avoided this moment for years, pushing it aside like unwanted memories swept under a mat. But today, something pulled her toward it. Maybe it was her aching bones, maybe the whispers of her past, or maybe the realization that she could not carry her secret much longer. With a soft sigh, Mama Ruth knelt down beside her bed. The wooden floor creaked slightly beneath her weight. She lifted the quilt, then another, and finally reached for the small, worn-out wooden box hidden deep under the frame. The box was old, older than half the village itself. The carvings on its surface had faded, but she still remembered every line, every curve. She had etched them herself many years ago, on a night filled with tears and fear. When she touched the lid, her fingers hesitated. The familiar sting of old pain rose inside her, sharp, cold, and unwelcome. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. 40 years, she whispered to the silent room. 40 years of holding on. Finally, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a single item, a faded, yellowing letter, folded carefully as though someone had tried to protect it from time. But time had touched it anyway. The edges were brittle, the ink slightly smudged, but the words remained alive like ghosts refusing to fade. Mama Ruth picked up the letter with trembling hands. The moment she touched it, memories flooded her mind. Memories of rain hammering on a church roof, a tiny bundle wrapped in a thin cloth, a baby's cry piercing the darkness. The night she found the letter had changed her life forever. And the night she wrote her own message on it had changed her even more. She sank slowly onto her bed, staring at the letter as though it might speak. For years she had debated burning it. For years she had wondered if hiding it was the right choice. But she never found the courage to destroy it, because the letter wasn't just paper. It was truth. It was guilt. It was love. It was everything she was terrified to face. A tear slid down her wrinkled cheek. "Maybe it is time," she whispered, voice shaking. "Time to let someone else know." Her heart felt both heavy and strangely relieved. She had lived her whole life in silence, carrying a secret that had shaped her every breath. But secrets, no matter how deep you bury them, have a way of rising to the surface. She folded the letter gently back in a box, this time not to hide it, but to prepare it, because the truth she had buried for 4 decades was finally ready to be heard. Amelia had grown up only 3 houses away from Mama Ruth, yet she always felt the elderly woman lived in a world of her own, quiet, distant, and wrapped in a softness that made people speak in hushed tones around her. While most villagers saw Mama Ruth as simply the old woman who lived alone, Amelia saw something deeper in her eyes, gentleness mixed with unspoken pain. Amelia was 26, bright-eyed, and known for her kindness. She helped everyone, carrying groceries for elderly neighbors, feeding stray cats, and running errands for mothers too busy to leave home. But of all the people she helped, Mama Ruth was special to her. There is something comforting about that small wooden house and the smell of cinnamon tea that always greeted her at the door. Most afternoons, after returning from work at the village pharmacy, Amelia would stop by to check on Mama Ruth. She would knock gently, and Mama Ruth would open the door with the same warm smile, as if she had been waiting for that knock all day. "Child, you're here," Mama Ruth would say, voice soft as cotton. Amelia would laugh. "I told you, Mama Ruth. I'll always come." Their bond had grown naturally over the years, like a seed planted unintentionally, but watered daily by affection and shared moments. Amelia found comfort in the old woman's presence, and Mama Ruth found peace in the young woman's company. Though neither said it aloud, they relied on each other more than they realized. On this particular evening, Amelia walked toward Mama Ruth's house with a basket of fresh vegetables and a small jar of honey. She noticed something unusual. The front window was open, and the curtains fluttered like anxious hands. Mama Ruth rarely opened that window. "Maybe she's not feeling well," Amelia murmured as she hurried her steps. When she knocked, there was no immediate response. Instead, she heard slow footsteps approaching the door. Mama Ruth opened it, but her smile was faint, her eyes heavy as though she had been crying or remembering something she wished she hadn't. Amelia's voice softened. "Mama Ruth, you all right?" The elderly woman forced a smile. "I'm fine, child. Come in." Amelia entered, placing the basket on the table. She scanned the room, noticing the wooden box sitting on the edge of the bed, something she had never seen before. Mama Ruth quickly moved it aside, but not before Amelia caught a glimpse of a yellowed piece of paper inside. She didn't ask. Amelia respected boundaries. But the air felt different today, thicker, filled with something unspoken. "Mama Ruth, do you want me to make you tea?" Amelia asked gently. Yes, that would be nice," Mama Ruth replied, her voice softer than usual. As Amelia boiled the water, she watched the old woman from the corner of her eye. Mama Ruth sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap, her gaze far away as if lost in a memory that refused to let her go. For the first time, Amelia sensed that behind Mama Ruth's gentle silence, there was a story waiting, aching to be told. And soon, she would be the one chosen to hear it. The steam from Amelia's teacup curled gently toward the ceiling, disappearing like a whispered secret carried away by the wind. She sat across from Mama Ruth, whose trembling hands held her own cup untouched. The warm glow of the tiny oil lamp flickered between them, casting long shadows on the walls, shadows that danced like echoes from another time. Silence filled the small room, not the peaceful kind that came with dusk, but a heavier, expectant silence, one that carried the weight of something long buried. Amelia placed her cup down. "Mama Ruth," she said softly, "you look troubled today." Mama Ruth's eyes lifted slowly, and for the first time in all the years Amelia had known her, she didn't hide. Instead, her gaze held a sorrow that made Amelia's heart tighten. "Child," Mama Ruth began, voice breaking, "there is something I must tell you, something I should have spoken long ago." Amelia leaned in, her expression gentle. "You can tell me anything." Mama Ruth sighed, a long, tired breath as though she were releasing years of pain with it. She reached for the wooden box she had tried to hide earlier. Her hands hovered over it for a moment before she brought it to the table. She opened it slowly, carefully, like someone unwrapping a wound that had never healed. Inside lay the faded letter. The room grew still. Mama Ruth's voice trembled as she touched the fragile paper. "This letter has been with me for 40 years. I kept it hidden because I was afraid. Afraid of what it meant. Afraid of what it would do." Her eyes glistened. Afraid of losing everything. Amelia felt a strange chill run down her spine. She didn't speak. She knew Mama Ruth needed silence to gather courage. "I must tell you the truth," Mama Ruth whispered. "I cannot carry it into the grave." A tear slipped down her cheek, tracing the lines of her age, the lines carved by years of regret and love. "Amelia, your mother, everything she believed about her beginnings was not the whole story." Amelia's breath caught. She felt her heart thump louder in her chest, but she stayed still, steady, waiting. Mama Ruth's voice grew softer. "I was there the night your mother entered this world. I was there when the rain came down like the sky itself was crying. I was there when she was left alone." The young woman's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. Mama Ruth continued, her voice cracking. "Someone abandoned her on the church steps. A newborn, so small, so cold. Her hands shook harder. And I picked her up. I wrapped her in my shawl. I took her home." Amelia's throat tightened. "I raised her," Mama Ruth whispered. "I loved her, but I never told her the truth. I never told anyone. I was afraid people would take her away. Afraid she would hate me for the life she was denied." A tear fell onto the letter. "And now, I must tell you, because you deserve to know where you come from, and because my heart cannot hold this secret any longer." Amelia reached forward, placing her hand gently over Mama Ruth's trembling fingers. "I'm here," she whispered. "Tell me everything." And with that simple touch, warm, steady, full of love, the floodgates of Mama Ruth's 40-year secret slowly, painfully began to open. The memory returned to Mama Ruth not as a gentle recollection, but as a storm, sharp, loud, and merciless. Even after 4 decades, she could still hear the sky that night, roaring like a wounded beast. She could smell the wet earth, feel the cold wind that sliced through her thin shawl, and she could still see the darkness swallowing everything around her. It had been the worst storm the village had seen in years. Rain hammered the rooftops, lightning tore open the sky, and the church bell, hit again and again by the wind, rang wildly as if calling for help. Most people stayed locked inside their homes, but Mama Ruth, younger then and full of quiet courage, had braved the storm to check on the church supplies. She remembered running up the muddy path, her sandals slipping, her shawl plastered to her skin. But halfway up the stone steps, she froze. At first, she thought it was just the wind playing tricks. But then she heard it, a sound so fragile, so desperate, it sliced through the storm like a cry from the heavens. A baby's cry. Her heart kicked against her ribs. "No, not out here," she whispered, her voice swallowed by thunder. She rushed toward the church entrance. There, just beneath the awning, wrapped in a thin cloth soaked with rain, was a newborn baby, tiny, shivering, struggling to breathe. The child's wails were broken, as if her little lungs could no longer fight the cold. Mama Ruth fell to her knees, scooping the bundle into her arms. "Oh Lord," she breathed, her voice trembling. Who would leave a child like this? The storm raged on, wind whipping at her back as she held the baby against her chest. The cloth was too thin, the child's skin too cold, her breaths too weak. "Stay with me," Mama Ruth begged, her tears mixing with the rain. "Please stay with me." With one hand shielding the infant's tiny head, she ran, fought, through the storm, her feet sinking into the mud. Several times she slipped, but she refused to let go. Each time she rose, the baby cried softer, weaker. "No, no, no," she whispered urgently. "Don't leave me. Don't give up." Lightning struck somewhere nearby, illuminating the village for a split second, and in that flash, Mama Ruth saw the baby's face clearly for the first time, tiny, delicate, and fighting for life. That image never left her. She burst into her home, closing the door against the storm. She lit the lamp with trembling hands, wrapped the baby in her thickest blanket, and held her close to her chest. "Show us that you're safe now." Hours passed. The storm eventually collapsed into silence. And just before dawn, when the first sliver of light entered the room, the baby opened her eyes, small, brown, glistening. Mama Ruth broke down sobbing, because in that moment, she knew, she would not let this child go. Not to the authorities, not to fate, not to anyone. That storm had not just brought destruction. It had brought her a daughter. The morning after the storm, the village awoke to broken branches, flooded paths, and roofs dripping with last night's fury. But inside Mama Ruth's small wooden house, something tender, fragile, and miraculous stirred beneath layers of blankets. The baby, now warm and breathing softly, slept with her tiny fist curled around the edge of Mama Ruth's shawl. That shawl would become her first cradle, her protection, her silent witness. Mama Ruth watched her with trembling awe. She had never held a newborn before, yet her arms felt as though they had waited their whole life for this moment. But the world outside didn't know, and she wasn't ready for them to know. She understood the villagers, kind, yes, but quick to question, quick to judge. A baby found at the church steps? Abandoned? Found alone? They would ask where the mother was, who the father might be, why Mama Ruth had been there at that exact hour. Rumors could ruin lives, and the child had already suffered enough before her life had even begun. So Mama Ruth made a decision that would shape everything that followed. She would raise this child in secret. In those first weeks, she told neighbors she was caring for a relative's baby who had fallen ill. They believed her. They always believed her gentle words, her soft eyes. She was the kind of woman no one suspected of anything complicated. It was both a blessing and a shield. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And the baby, who she named Liana, grew with the kind of joy that filled every corner of the house. Liana's first laugh lit up Mama Ruth's heart brighter than the morning sun. Her first steps were wobbly and wild, and Mama Ruth cried so loudly with joy that the neighbors came running, thinking she had hurt herself. But even joy carried shadows. There were nights when Liana would cry endlessly, and Mama Ruth, exhausted and alone, would sit on the floor with her, rocking gently, whispering prayers for strength. There were days when food was scarce, and Ruth would give Liana the bigger portion, pretending she had already eaten. Raising a child alone was not easy. Raising one in secret was even harder. When Liana turned 6, she began asking questions. "Mama, why don't I have a father like other children? Mama, where did I come from? Mama, why do people ask why we look different?" Mama Ruth always answered with love, but never with truth. "You came from love," she would say softly, "and love is all you need to know right now." As Liana grew older, the lie grew heavier. But Mama Ruth carried it silently, like a stone inside her heart. She protected her daughter fiercely, shielding her from curious eyes, from whispers, from the painful truth that might shatter her innocence. Years passed. Liana grew into a beautiful, bright young woman, Amelia's mother. She left the village to start her own life, never knowing the storm she was born into or the hands that saved her. She carried Mama Ruth's love without knowing its origins, and Mama Ruth carried the secret alone. For decades. Every birthday, every milestone, every moment Liana called her mama, unaware of how literal that word truly was. But secrets are heavy things, and even the strongest hearts eventually grow tired. Mama Ruth knew that one day, someone would need to hear the truth, and that someone was Amelia. The lamp flickered softly, casting trembling shadows across Mama Ruth's face as she prepared herself to speak words she had buried for a lifetime. Amelia sat quietly beside her, her hands folded, her heart beating faster with every passing second. She could feel the heaviness in the air, the kind that comes before a confession that changes everything. Mama Ruth inhaled slowly, as though gathering the shattered pieces of her past. "Child," she began, voice fragile. "People think silence is chosen easily. But sometimes silence is the only thing you have left when the world refuses to understand your truth." Amelia leaned in, her eyes gentle, urging her to continue. Mama Ruth looked down at her hands, aged, trembling, marked by time and sacrifice. "After I found Liana, I knew the village would ask questions I could not answer. A woman living alone, suddenly with a newborn? The gossip would have destroyed her future before it even began." She paused, her breath hitching. But that was not the only reason. Her eyes clouded over with a pain so old it felt like part of her bones. "The truth is, I did try to find her mother." Amelia's eyebrows lifted slightly. Mama Ruth continued, her voice cracking. "A week after I found the baby, a stranger came to the village. A woman, thin, bruised, terrified. She was asking if anyone had seen a child. But when I stepped forward to tell her I knew, I saw the man who came with her. She shivered, even after 40 years. His eyes were cruel, his voice sharp as a blade. I heard him whisper to her, 'If you speak, you know what happens.' The way she flinched, the way her hands trembled. I knew immediately that the child was in danger." Amelia breathed slowly, absorbing every word. That woman, she wanted her baby. I could see it in her eyes. But she was trapped in a life she could not escape. A life filled with fear. Mama Ruth swallowed hard. "I realized if I gave Liana back to her, that man would hurt them both. And maybe he already had." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "So I did what I thought was right. I hid the child. I kept her safe. And when the woman left the village, she left with tears streaming down her face. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She never said a word. But she looked at me like she knew, like she trusted me to protect her baby." Amelia felt a sudden ache in her chest. "I wanted to tell Liana everything when she grew older," Mama Ruth continued. "But each year, the lie grew bigger, heavier. I saw how happy she was, how safe. I feared that telling her the truth would make her feel unwanted, abandoned, broken. I feared she might go searching for a past that could destroy her." Her voice quivered. "And then she became your mother. And you, Amelia, you brought her so much joy." Mama Ruth touched Amelia's hand. "I didn't want my secret to stain your life, too." Amelia squeezed her hand gently, her voice soft. "Mama Ruth, you loved her. You protected her. That is not something to be ashamed of." Mama Ruth's tears fell freely now. "But love can be heavy, child, and silence even heavier." At that moment, Amelia understood. Mama Ruth hadn't stayed silent out of selfishness. She had stayed silent out of love and fear, and a promise made to a desperate mother on a stormy night long ago. The kitchen felt unusually still that evening. The sun had dipped low, painting the curtains in a tired orange glow. Amelia stood by the sink, pretending to rinse the same cup for far too long. Her heart was beating faster than she could hide. She had spent the whole afternoon replaying Mama Ruth's trembling voice, the confession that had slipped out like a long-sealed wound finally tearing open. She turned slowly. "Mama Ruth, the boy in the photograph. Was he your son?" Mama Ruth didn't answer immediately. She sat at the small wooden table, hands folded, eyes lowered. She looked smaller today, like the truth had shrunk her, pulling her back into a version of herself she had tried to bury. After what felt like a lifetime, Mama Ruth nodded. It was a gentle nod, soft, but it struck Amelia like a thunderclap. Amelia stepped closer, her throat tightening. But why didn't you ever tell him? Why didn't you tell anyone? Mama Ruth sighed, her breath shaky like old paper catching wind. Child, there are truths that liberate, and there are truths that destroy. And life makes you choose between the two. Amelia sat across from her, eyes wide, heartbreaking. Mama Ruth, he deserved to know you. And he did, Mama Ruth whispered, just not as his mother. A silence hung between them, heavy but tender. She reached for the small tin box she had shown earlier. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside were letters, many more than Amelia realized. Dozens, all unopened, all yellowed with time. Amelia's voice cracked. He wrote to you? Mama Ruth nodded again, eyes glistening. Every year on his birthday, every Christmas, every time he achieved something. He wrote because he thought I was just a kind neighbor from his childhood. He never knew the truth. Not from me. Amelia's breath shuddered. Mama Ruth, this must have been torture. Mama Ruth swallowed hard. Child, I believed I was protecting him. Protecting everyone. Her voice grew fragile. But secrets, they take pieces from you. 1 year, one regret at a time. Amelia felt her chest tighten. For the first time, she saw the depth of Ruth's loneliness. Not the gentle quiet she presented to the world, but the deep, soul-carving silence of someone who had carried a truth too heavy for one heart. Slowly, she reached across the table and held Mama Ruth's trembling hands. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. The old woman's eyes finally rose to meet Amelia's. And in them, beneath the years, beneath the sorrow, was a flicker of relief. A small flame that said, someone finally knows. Someone finally sees me. Amelia squeezed her hands tighter. Mama Ruth, what do you want to do now? The question lingered in the quiet room. At last, Mama Ruth whispered, I want to finish this story so you can decide if he deserves to know. And just like that, Amelia understood. Tonight, she wasn't just a helper. She was the keeper of a fragile, unfinished truth. The evening sky had softened into shades of deep indigo, dotted with the first timid stars. The small wooden house felt warmer somehow, as if the walls themselves had absorbed Mama Ruth's long-held secrets and were now breathing them out gently, like a sigh of relief. Amelia sat beside her on the couch, her hand firmly holding Mama Ruth's, both of them tethered to one another by a fragile thread of trust that had just begun to stretch and grow. I never knew, Amelia whispered, her voice trembling. I never imagined the life you carried alone, the choices you had to make. Mama Ruth let out a soft, almost inaudible laugh, a sound like wind brushing through dry leaves. Child, no one knows the weight of a secret until it is theirs to bear. She paused, letting the silence wrap around them like a comforting blanket. I was afraid I had failed everyone I loved. Amelia shook her head. You didn't fail. You saved a life. You saved generations. You did what no one else had the courage to do. Mama Ruth's eyes glistened as she looked at Amelia. For the first time in decades, she felt the sharp edge of fear dull. Here was someone who could see her. Not the old, smiling woman the village believed her to be, but the woman who had lived in the shadows of sacrifice and love. And in Amelia's gaze, she felt forgiveness, unspoken, complete, and healing. Tears slipped silently down Mama Ruth's cheeks. Amelia, moved, leaned in, gently brushing them away. It's okay, Mama Ruth. You don't have to carry this burden anymore. Not with me. The warmth of those words filled the small room, washing over Mama Ruth like the gentle rainfall of her youth. She exhaled slowly, feeling a peace she hadn't known for decades. The weight in her chest, the weight she had carried silently through storms, nights of crying, and years of whispered prayers, began to lift. Promise me something, Mama Ruth said, her voice soft but resolute. Promise me you will carry this story forward, gently, with love, if the time comes. Amelia nodded, squeezing her hands tightly. I promise. But more than that, I promise to be here. For you. Always. And in that promise, something shifted between them. A bond formed, not just of love, but of understanding. The kind of bond that can heal old wounds, mend fractured hearts, and create new beginnings even in the twilight of life. Mama Ruth's lips curved into a rare, full smile. "Child, you've given me more than words can say. I think I finally understand what it feels like to be seen." They sat together, the room glowing with soft lamplight. The night outside whispered and settled, no longer a threatening storm, but a quiet protector, listening to two hearts reconnecting across generations. In that moment, Amelia realized that healing does not always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives slowly, in small touches, in the courage to speak, in the act of simply being there for someone who's carried too much alone. And Mama Ruth, after 40 long years, felt it. The first light of true peace, the first taste of forgiveness, and a bond, tender and unbreakable, that could carry her gently into the days ahead. The dawn was soft, tender, almost reverent, when Mama Ruth's breathing slowed to a quiet rhythm. The first light of morning spilled across her small wooden house, catching dust motes that floated like tiny memories suspended in the air. Amelia sat beside her bed, her hand resting over Mama Ruth's frail fingers, feeling the pulse of a life that had given so much silently, yet shaped so many hearts. Mama Ruth's eyes, once clouded with secrets and worry, now held a calm clarity. She turned her gaze toward Amelia, a faint smile touching her lips. "Child, you've been my strength," she whispered, "and now I can rest." Amelia squeezed her hand gently, holding back tears. "Mama Ruth, you gave me everything. Your love, your courage, your story. I will carry it with me, always." The old woman nodded softly, her breath slow but even. Outside, the village was waking. The soft clatter of footsteps on the red soil path, the distant crow of a rooster, and the gentle rustle of mango leaves swaying in the morning breeze. It all felt ordinary, yet sacred, as if the world itself was honoring her quiet departure. Mama Ruth's gaze drifted toward the small wooden box on the bedside table, where the faded letters lay neatly stacked. "Amelia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "when I'm gone, let them know, let the truth live. Not to hurt, but to remind everyone that some love is quiet, some heroes walk unseen." Amelia's eyes glistened as she nodded. "I promise, Mama Ruth, your story will shine." A few hours later, when the sun had fully risen, Mama Ruth's breathing slowed further, and finally, she slipped into the peaceful sleep that had eluded her for decades. Her face, serene and gentle, seemed almost to glow in the morning light. A life of love, sacrifice, and courage etched softly into every line and wrinkle. Amelia wrapped the green shawl, the one Mama Ruth had carried for 40 years, around her shoulders and gently placed it over the old woman's chest. It was more than a shawl now. It was a symbol of survival, resilience, and love that had shaped generations. Amelia knelt, pressing her forehead to Mama Ruth's hand, whispering a quiet goodbye. "Thank you, Mama Ruth, for everything." As the days passed, the village mourned the woman who had always seemed untouchable, serene, and slightly mysterious. But for Amelia, the mourning was intertwined with gratitude. She understood now the full measure of Mama Ruth's life, the quiet heroism, the long nights of fear, the decisions made in the shadows for love, and the courage to carry a secret for decades. And as Amelia began to share Mama Ruth's story with those who would listen, carefully, gently, with reverence, it became clear that one life, even lived in silence, could leave an indelible mark. Mama Ruth's love, her courage, her sacrifice, and her unwavering heart became a legacy, reaching far beyond her small wooden house, beyond the village, and into the lives of those who would hear, remember, and honor her quiet heroism. Mama Ruth had walked her path unseen, yet her story, now told, would carry her into eternity. And in that story, generations would find a truth so profound that sometimes the greatest acts of love are never loud, never celebrated, but live on forever in the hearts of those who truly see. And so, in peace and quiet dignity, Mama Ruth rested, her legacy now eternal, her love unbroken, her story finally free. Mama Ruth had walked her path unseen, yet her story, now told, would carry her into eternity. And in that story, generations would find a truth so profound that sometimes the greatest acts of love are never loud, never celebrated, but live on forever in the hearts of those who truly see. And so, in peace and quiet dignity, Mama Ruth rested, her legacy now eternal, her love unbroken, her story finally free.